All right, we're back. It is COMP123, and it's summer 2016 at Centennial, week 11, part 1 of our broadcast. We're talking about C#. This is programming 2. So I had this idea that I could use the machine in front of me, the actual lab machine, to do the broadcast, but unfortunately, I can't get access to the speaker. So I do apologize. The microphone is what I'm saying. So what we're going to be doing today is I want to be talking about setting up, how do I set up a database connection with Visual Studio 2015, right? Now you guys have been doing, I'm guessing you guys have been doing any kind of database work this semester, yeah? Okay. Have you been using SQL or no? SQL Server? Or is it Oracle? Okay, so we're going to do a little different flavor. We're going to be doing, so you've been doing Oracle, we're going to be using SQL Server. Let's see how we can do this. Now there's two ways. If the easiest way, I'll put it this way, okay? The easiest way would be to connect to Azure and make one up there. But unfortunately for us, we have no access. Our campus blocks access to Azure, all right? So if you wanted to try and use a server that was up on Microsoft Azure, it would fail. Why do we need to do database? Because I want to do the setup today if I can. If I can't, we'll circle back to it, all right? But what I want to do is set up a new project for today. Let's try this out. And we're going to go with a Windows Form application. We're going to call this COMP123, summer 2016, and lesson 11, right? And of course, I'm going to bury this in the right folder, COMP123. Windows Form application. I will create a Git repository for this and press OK. And when it comes up with the Windows Form app, we need to do a few different things here to set up. So you're going to see something like this, right? And maybe my Solution Explorer is on the right side. All right. What I want to do here is unpin this for a second, right? And on the left, I have a bunch of stuff that's parked, these windows here on the left. Now, if you're using Visual Studio 2013 or 2015, what I need you to pull up is something called SQL Server Object Explorer, SQL Server Object Explorer. And she looks like this, SQL Server Object Explorer, right? Okay. If you don't have it, you can get the window by going to View. And if you go to Other Windows, right? I believe it should be somewhere maybe it's under Data. Hold on a second here. It's different for everybody. Oh, here it is. So it's under right here. Now this is where mine comes up. Yours may not be there. Is it there? All right. Visual Studio 2013 users, is it there? I can't tell because I don't have Visual Studio 2013 in front of me. So the guys who are using the machines in front of them. Okay, I'll wait till you guys are done. Is it there? Oh, you are seeing? Okay. So we want to see SQL Server Object Explorer. This is the one we want, SQL Server Object Explorer. When it comes up, you may not see the windows that I'm seeing here. But what we want to look at is something like this, all right? It might say, to do DB, that's fine. It might say something like this, local DB on the right, under SQL Server. You might see no SQL Server. What do you guys see? Do you guys see SQL Server at all on the left? If you pin SQL Server Object Explorer up, what do you guys see? This is important for us to kind of look at. Yeah, that's the one I see. And local DB, and then what is it called? Projects V12. Okay. Excellent. Mine's the next one because I'm using Visual Studio 2015. But yours, you should see something like local DB blah, 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 right? Do you actually see a thing like this? Yeah. All right. Here's what I want you to do for this one. This is, do you see it or no? Sorry? Project V13, the mine, right? See up here? Is this what you see? Okay, good. Doesn't matter which one you see. If you see V13 or V12, this is what I want you to do. I want you to open it up, right? So expand it. Underneath, you'll see a databases folder. It looks like a folder, right? Do this with me because you will be benefiting from it as opposed to waiting for me to do it later. See databases, okay? Underneath databases, you may or may not see a database. I see one, but don't worry about what I see, right? In fact, if anything, I'll just delete the database, and that's not a big deal. Okay, there we go. No database. So you might see something like this, no database. You might see other ones, who cares? If you see a database or you don't see a database, I want you to, under databases, right-click and click Add New Database.
On the database?
Yeah, so basically on the database folder, right-click, Add New Database. Now it's going to ask you for a database name. Are you guys all with me? All right. The database name is going to be the one we're going to use today, which we're going to say, we're just going to call it COMP123. That's the database we're going to use, okay? So for our course, COMP123. Okay? And then press OK. I'm going to wait for you guys to catch up.
Just a quick question. This is maybe for assignment. The next assignment that we're doing with the forms.
It's also with, I want to talk about form data, how to get data, how to connect with forms to a database, right? How to do that. And in order for us to do that, we need some kind of data store. We're going to talk about this, and there'll be another assignment coming up after this that'll have to do with database access, right? Where we have a little bit of a database, we store some data, because without data, I mean, so far we've been dealing with it kind of weird. The other thing is we're also going to be connecting to, we're going to be using SQL, or sorry, Link to access our database a little bit, and eventually not just Link, but the entity framework. Right, so we need to know how to do this a bunch of times. We're going to do this for COMP123. We'll use the same database, just various tables in the database. Okay, let's do it like this first. So we're doing it the reverse way this time around. Okay, so I got my COMP123. Are you good? Press OK. So when you create a database, what you're going to get is one of these things. It looks like this, but the database itself has 0 tables in it. Right? Think about a table as a collection of data that is related. All right, now you guys should know that from your database studies. I want to add a new table. So I'm going to right-click on tables, click Add New Table. You can do this all in Visual Studio, which is really cool. The better tool is SQL Server Management Studio, and you can download that as well. I think it might be on the machine in front of you too, version 14. For now, leave it the way it is. We're doing this all in Visual Studio, so follow me here. So where it says here on the bottom, you might see a T-SQL statement on the bottom, right? If you look at this, on the bottom it says table. Please change the name of this table to students. There you go, that's the students table, right? That's the first change, just the students table. Up here, where it says ID, I'm just going to unclip this here, right? If you see ID on the top, this is our primary key. But however, one of the things you have to notice is, I'm going to bring up Solution Explorer here, pin this up, and I'm also going to pin properties for a second, right? If I click on the ID on the right, okay, there's a bunch of properties for this ID. We're just kind of creating our table through Visual Studio here. On the right, you want to see this thing that says identity specification on the right. And you want to choose that this ID, I'm clicking on ID, you want to make this from false to true. What this will do is make our primary key auto increment, which is very important. So please do this. So again, I've just clicked on an ID up here in the table designer. That's what we're doing. And on the right, in our properties menu, we're pushing up. We're clicking under identity specification, and I'm choosing is identity true. Now it might be slightly different for you. We want to. Good. Well, we should use true. This is the first thing. Now notice that it's writing a T-SQL statement down here. That's basically saying ID int non-null primary key identity. That's what it should say. Okay, that basically says that we're going to create a primary key. Okay, good. So that's our primary key for our students table. You can also change the name. If you're not happy with ID and you want like student ID or something like that, we can do that. And why don't we try this out? So say student ID. I'll make it IDI, capital D. That's fine too. And notice it changes the bottom over here, right? So it changes the T-SQL statement. The next line is the next field. And the next field I want is the student name. So we're going to say student, just to be clear, student name. It says nvarchar 10. That's pretty darn small, right? Nvarchar 10. That means there's like, or ncar is what it says. Let's change it to, again, you can change this whatever you want, but let's make this, could make it varchar 50, right? I could change it whatever I want, right? To, instead of ncar, why ncar instead of varchar? Location services allows you to be more flexible. So we can, let's say ncar, let's make this like, I don't know, our names can be as big as 50, all right? Now, when I say name, I'm saying student name, like all name, first name and last name. In the future, we can, do you think there might be a future where we have student first name, student last name? And if that might be more descriptive, we can change this to first name, right? And make another one last name. That's okay. We see how I'm showing you how this can change. Make sure this is NCAR 50 as well. Again, I can, and if you want NVARCAR 50, you can do that as well. NVARCAR 50, you can choose NVARCAR 50 as the type, no problem. Here's something. Do I need, if I'm entering data for my student, should my student name be allowed to be first name and last name? Should they be allowed to be empty? I think the answer is no. So they can't be null. So please click off and allow nulls, right? Now we also have to have other pieces of information. Like for example, I think the other mandatory piece, not just the student ID, is the ID of the table. But what we want is like student number or student number. So let's just put in number. That's the name of our table. And it's gonna be NCAR 50, NVARCAR 50. Why? Because, and it can't be null, because this way you can have a long student number if you want. We can change that later on if we want a specific length. So first name, last name, and number, right? Could I put other things in here? Yeah, I could. I could put date of birth and blah, blah, and address information and whatever. But we're not gonna do that right now. All we're gonna have is one table. It's gonna have student data, and we're gonna put some first names and last names in there. Okay, so I'm good with my table design, let's just say. And by the way, we can update this later on. If you notice there's a little update button up here, click the update button. So what this does when my when it updates, there you go. It'll ask you for this little update script, and then just click on update database. That might be very similar or quite similar to yours.
Same thing.
Excellent. What it does is it goes up, and when it says update completed successfully, I have my database table. Let's click off of this now. Okay, I'm going to go back to SQL Server Object Explorer, and we're going to pin this back on. And I want to see the table now, right? We should be able to see DBO students, is what it should say. Yeah? All right. I want you to right-click there and go View Data.
The only thing I don't have is the external tables.
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Just go to right-click and say View Data. Okay, well then you're going to get this thing over here. Let me unpin this for a second. All right, so we're going to enter some data. Don't enter the student ID because that's all automatically generated. Notice it's kind of grayed out. But this stuff we need. We need first name, last name, and student name. So put some data in here. I'm going to put my first name, my last name, and my number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Let's say, and go to the next one. So that's Tom, and then we'll say Jessica Jones, right? And we'll add another student number there, right? And we'll go in. I'll put in some other ones in there, like Clark Kent. Just make it, funny but relevant, I guess, in some ways. You can put in your names in there as well, and let's make let's say a total of 5 entries here. And what you're actually doing is filling the data into your database, actually adding data into your database right through here, which is kind of very convenient for us to do some test data, right? So Tom, Jessica, Clark, how about Tony Stark? There we go, Tony Stark. There we go. And we have some other ones here, like, I don't know, Jean-Luc Picard, why not? Since he's talking about Star Trek these days, right? New Star Trek movie just came out. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So a bunch of different IDs. We have no rhyme and reason for them right now. We got 5 pieces of data. And you know what? I don't have to do anything here. It's actually physically on our database now. Whatever you put in here, it's physically, and you can do, this is a little bit of test data for us to use. And we just got a few fields and 1 table. And let's close this off. Yay. Okay. We have our form. And I want to link my data to my form. Okay. I want to be able to display my data to the form. And the easiest way to do that is with something called a data grid view. All right. This is why I did all this. So first of all, let's call this our student list form. So I'm going to rename this thing, rename. So right click, rename. We'll call this student list form. There we go, the student list form, which will ask you to rename everything. You say yes. And then with the form itself, we'll just kind of come up to the name of the form where it says text and just say student list. That's the name of what the form will show when it comes up. That's the text on the form. We definitely want our start position here. Again, I'm giving you lots of practice of this to go center screen. So it comes up, center screen for a form. Yeah, we'll save everything. Okay, cool. We got a list, la 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 la. Are you with me? All right. We want to go to Toolbox. And if I go to Toolbox, I want to pin my toolbox up here. And there is a interesting little, under data, so there's a bunch of different categories here. Under data, we want to hit data grid view. Guys and girls, this is the basic way of getting data from your database. I'm going to drag data grid view onto my form. Okay, cool. Now notice where it says choose data source. Under choose data source, I got nothing, right? Please pull down the data. And if you notice, there's nothing there, right? Even though we configured a database table and all that stuff, right? Remember, we have to keep in mind what that is, right? We don't have a database source for this thing. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can configure the data sources first and then go here, or you can configure the data source from here directly. So let's do this, add project data source. All right, notice that there's some options, database, service, object, SharePoint. Okay, it's definitely gonna be database. Next. And data set. And we're going to run into a problem in a second. I'll show you what that is. Next. Okay, this is definitely, you won't see this. I want to click on new connection. All right, here's the problem with this. You might see something like this, right? All right, it can't be access database file because we don't have access. It's not ODBC data source because we don't have that. We don't have a Microsoft SQL Server database file. We don't have that. But we just have a SQL database, which is this one. You can also choose, if you're working with Oracle, you would choose that, and you can add others. Right now, we're going to just choose this one, Microsoft SQL Server, this one. Don't click always use this one. You don't have to. Just press OK. What it does is it asks you now for the server name. Remember that other server name we had up? Local DB, blah, 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 blah. Right? Do you have that information? Is it handy? Right? Hell no is the answer, right? And the reason for this is because you didn't record it, right? So we have to go back and do it. That's why I told you it's going to be a problem. Cancel. Please cancel this connection. Cancel, 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 cancel. And let's just leave it the way it is right now for a second. Two things to note. There is an app config file here, app config. If I double click my app config, right, it pulls up this. App config is where all the connections to the databases are going to be stored. For now, there's nothing, which is good. If you have anything in there that says like connection or whatever, delete it because it'll be messed up. Okay, cool. Let's go back to data sources on the left. Data sources, notice it says add new data source. Well, we could do that, but we'll have the same problem. We need to go to back to SQL Server, our SQL Server data source that we had before. That's SQL Server Object Explorer. See this one? Let's go back there for a second. And we need to, when we go there, you see this local DB project. Yours might be V12 or V13, depending on who you are, like what version you're using. There's also, if you're using the latest version of Visual Studio 2015, you also might see something like MS SQL Local DB, one of these two things. Depending on which one it is, you need to record this name. Well, how do I do that? Well, if I click on here, and I have my properties window up on the right, here's my product, right? But there's nothing there that says anything. I mean, you could record it. You need to know it, right? And I can't just go properties. Properties won't do anything for me, right? Properties will give me my connection string, though. If I really wanted to make my own connection string, and if I look under connection string, open this up here, here's connection string. You can see that the connection string for this is here, right? So I could record this connection string and create my connection string manually. What I really need to record, and just record this down, is this. Local DB projects, exactly this, the exact way to say this. I think they might not care about case. It won't be case sensitive at all, my guess. but localDB projects v13 is all you need, right? Or whatever yours is called. Mine's called localDB projects v13. Let's use that one. Okay, good. Now that we have that, now I can make my data source. Let's do the data source this way. Add new data source. Same thing we had before. Take a look. Here's my database. Go next. Here's my data set. Go next. I want a new connection, right? And now it has to say Microsoft SQL Server, not the other ones. Remember, if you're here, make sure you pick Microsoft SQL Server. And then from here, put in brackets, just like you saw, local DB, right? And then, is it slash, forward slash, or backslash? Do you remember? And then, is it the other way?
It's the other way. Yeah.
Let's try it out. So project
It's not gonna work.
V13, right? Why?
When you usually try it out,
No, why? And then,
it
now look at this. See where it says enter a database, and if it works, we should be able to do something like this. And you should see COMP123. Now, yours might say projects V12, yours might say projects whatever. You need to pull down the one that works for you. Notice that I can see this automatically because I'm using, the authentication I'm using is Windows authentication. That means if you're authenticated to your machine, you have access to the server. Okay, that's what it means. If I was connecting to a SQL server online, I wouldn't use this method of authentication. I would use SQL Server authentication. And I would log in with my SQL Server credentials. Right now, all you need to do is Windows authentication. And down here, it should pull up, if you're connected properly, your COMP123 database we just made. Yes? Still loading? You need to put it in like this. Don't click refresh, right? You don't try and search. You just put it in, right? If you press search or refresh, it'll take forever. Yeah. Okay, let's cancel this. I'll do it all again, just for you guys. So data sources, how'd you get this window, you mean?
Yeah.
I can go to view, and if I go down to, it's just a window, right? So if you're always searching for any of these windows here, they're going to be listed inside your view, right? So if I go to other windows, data sources. Try this out. Okay, that's how I got to it. Here's my data sources. Let's try this again from scratch. I'm pinning this up for a second so we can see it. So add new data source, right? I'm going to go to database, next, data set, new connection, and then from here it's local DB, then backslash projects V13, yours might be V12. Please do not press refresh here, and just pull down the database. If you can see the databases come up, you're golden. Do you see the databases come up? Yes? Okay. Click on COMP123. This is the database we just made with the one table. Okay? Press OK. It's going to take you to this right here. And yours is going to say something different than mine. Mine is saying VM Windows because I'm actually running a VM. Yours is going to see the name of your Windows connection, right? Then it'll be local DB, whatever the funky string in there, and then COMP123 DBO, right? Notice that there's also a connection string that shows up right here. If you actually expand this piece, it'll say data source is local DB project v13, initial catalog is COMP123, integrated security is true. Okay, press next. Okay, here's the connection string, COMP123 connection string. All right, what COMP123 connection string is the name of the connection string to your database, right? So typically we want to make this contextual, right? If you're connecting to, let's say, for example, a big database for a university or a college, like, for example, let's say we're connecting to a database that was Centennial College database, chances are you'd have Centennial College connection string, all right? Here, we're dealing with a database that's for our course, so it's COMP123 connection string, all right? And you want to keep that whole context like this. Now, where is this going to be saved? In the app config file, all right? So let's press next. Now, it's going to pull up the tables and views. You see something like this, right? You want to go through here, and if you notice, I have students, my students table that I just chose, right? Now, for this connection, all I have is one table, and I'm going to click all the tables, or just one, whatever. It doesn't matter, same. Here's something that's a little different. It says COMP123 data set, right? My data set for COMP123. That means the data set that's connected to the connection, all right? That's associated with the connection. I could call this whatever I want, right? For now, let's just leave it as COMP123 data set and press finish. What it's going to do is it's going to make the connection in your app config. If I go look at my app config, there's a little check mark there. You can see it. And if I double click on my app config, you're going to see that now, I'm just going to unpin these so you can see better, right? That's the only reason why I'm doing this. You can see in the app config, there's a connection string with the name of your connection, right? Here's COMP123, summer 2016, lesson 11, property settings, right? Big connection string, right? And then there's the connection string itself. Data source is equal to local DB, projects v13 or v12, whatever yours is. And then provider name is system.data to SQL client. That's the provider type. That's the kind of connection we're making. This is all in XML format. And this app.config determines the connection to your databases and other things. Okay, cool. Let us close this up. We don't want to touch this right now. Okay, back to this, back to our data grid view, right? Okay, now that we have a connection, we did it the other way around this time. If we click on here, we can see that they choose data source. If you look at it, we can choose where it says other data sources. See that? Other data sources. And then open this up. Under project data sources, you should see a COMP123 data set, right? If you look at inside there, there's something called students. Okay, I just clicked on students, and I got this student ID, first name, and if I expand this my form here a little bit, so I can get all the students. Let's put it just a little bit over here, and open this up. You can see that I've got my student ID, my first name, my last name, and number. Do I really care about my student ID? Like it's an incremental, auto-incrementing list of students. And the answer is probably not. Who cares about that? That is something internal. So if I don't care about that, I'm going to go into my little smart arrow here again, right? And I'm going to go to Edit Columns. And under Edit Columns, where it says Student ID, I'm going to remove that column. Doesn't mean that it's removed from the database. It's just not associated. There's no column that's associated with that with the database table column Student ID. Now press OK. Okay, it changes the way the table has my data. Now I can change the actual data grid so it fits just the amount of data that I want, which is about right there. And I can also change my form so it's a little smaller, right, like this. And maybe what I want to do is on a toolbox perspective, before I launch my form, is I want to drag from common controls some kind of label here that says student list, right? And again, what I want to do is, from a properties perspective, I want to go and change my fonts to something a little bigger, like, I don't know, 20 Lucida Sans. Go. And maybe make it bold. Regular. Press OK. Yay. And now and down here, I'll actually type in the name for it, the text, which will be student list. There we go. Student list. Student list. And on top of that, right, that we have our student list, let's make sure that the label is named properly and that the data grid view is also named properly in the database. So here's my student list, and I want to call this, as an example, student list label. That's what that is. My data grid view, if I go right click and go properties, you can do that too as well. It'll bring up the properties. I want to change this to student list or students data grid view. Probably the right thing is to call it because it's part of the students table. So students, capital D, data grid view. Don't take away the data grid view one, like data grid view. Press OK. So students data grid view is what this thing is called. I'll print this up so you can see it better. All right, so I've labeled it and so on. Let's take a look at a couple things here that we can style this thing, right? Auto size is true. Columns is a collection. If I click on the columns property and I click on the little ellipses here, you can see that it brings up that little columns option again, where we can kind of set the columns, the order of the columns, all that stuff. That's what this does. All right, let's cancel this. You can also have a context menu strip if there's one associated with it. In this particular case, there is not, right? But I could have a context menu strip associated with this, right? All right, very cool, right? We have a little table, and let's see how this functions. So I'm just going to go and press play, right? So I haven't done anything. All I've done is got some data in the database, and I've got a little form that should display, if everything goes well, all of the data from the database that's in that one table. All right, let's take a look. Yes. And I see that there's some problems, right? Like my data is not formatted enough. I've got these scroll bars in here. Why? Because the way I formatted my data grid view is a little bit too small. You know, I want to basically make it so that it grows, and I can do this. Now, you'd be forgiven to think that I can just go in here and type a new piece of data, like, you know, I don't know, instead of Jean-Luc Guittard, like, you know, James Kirk, right, with the student ID of, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, right? And then press tab, and somehow, you know, just by doing that, it'll persist, right? Meh. This is just a display of data. We have to work hard to make it do something. So if I press, you know, X on this one and go back as an example, right? Let's fix this form. I'm just making it this little bit larger, right? Make it so it fits. And I definitely make it so that it takes a little bit more room. We'll make its form a little bigger. There we go. I'll tell you the exact size in a second when we find out the good way. And then run it again and see if it works. There we go. Now this is too big. See that? And you know what? Maybe this is too small. How do I change the font of the actual data grid view? Is there a way? Of course there is. So I'm going to go back to this. And if you look at, if I scroll down, well, font, I don't see the font option. I see dock, edit mode, edit keystroke, right? It says that. And then it says edit on enter, right? Edit on keystroke, right? That's totally different. Well, that means, let me go back to my data grid view. Did I enter Captain Kirk? No, right? Didn't do that. I don't have that kind of access yet. And here's my data source. My default cell style is this. So if I click on this, it tells me my default cell style. It tells me my font size. So if I want to go with my font size is larger, let's say the size of my thing, let's say 18 instead of 20. And I choose Lucinda Sans as well. Lucinda. Oh. Well, I can make it bold, just regular. It's a little bit bigger. For color, this is just how we, the for color, this is select back color when I select an object, selection for color, and so on. My format, my behavior. And you might get a selection here that shows you what it looks like. Ours is very big. And if I do this now, you can see that, unfortunately, our tables are huge. We like this, but I need to expand this so that I can see everything, right? And how do I do that? Because I've changed the size of my grid view, right? So there's my grid color. And if I go to my default style, go back to my default cell style, I know I'm playing. You might think, Tom, he's playing again. What is he doing these things for? How come? I'm doing this because when you get something that, sure, displays data, right? It's awesome. But the thing that you have to do is you got to think about, no, not number formatting. You got to think about how this thing displays. Our font basically displays our font size and so on. What about our cell size? Like that is definitely a problem. Because right now, our font's not fitting in the cells. Even if I made this thing really big, like really long like this, and maybe, I'm just going to pin this for a second. I made this much larger, like this big, let's say. So we have a lot of space for our data grid views, so we have some room, right? If I actually click in there, that's not good, because that just gives me an event. That's not what I want. Although the content click event might be useful if I want to do something with the content. For now, we're not going to do that. So how do I take it away? It's the same as anything else we've ever done. I'm going to go back to my lightning bolt and just delete it. Because by now you should know a bunch of stuff that you didn't know when we first started doing this stuff, right? All right. So cell border style, we can definitely choose that. Border style. And I'm going to keep going down because it's not cell border style. And then if I look down here and I say location, margin, maximum size, you know, that's interesting. Maximum size for this, for the data grid view. I could potentially put a maximum size so I can stop the size from increasing in total, the change of size itself. Here's my row template. My row template. And here's the size of my whole grid. Well, my row template has a few things here. And if I click in there, it tells me things like, do I have a context menu strip? My default cell style is this one. I can always go back in there, and we've already seen this before. Here's our default cell style, right? Here's my row template itself, right? Data grid view, index -1. Error text, scroll bars, cell errors. So what would I do? What can you recommend, looking at the properties, if you didn't know anything, how could I change the default cell size? How would I do that? Find it, please. This is a you do, right? And you tell me, because otherwise you guys are going to watch me and then it's just going to be a download, which is not cool. So anyone have a suggestion? Take a look. We've modified the rows itself, and it says auto size rows mode, right? Right. So now it says none. And if I say all cells, right? Auto size rows mode. And if I go all cells, look, notice how it went bigger. Let's see what it looks like now. That's cool, but that's the row, so that actually fits now this way. But I want it to fit this way. I want like my columns to be a little bit different, right? Show me. So where do I go? So go down to row template, okay, and divide height or the height. Okay, I could change this. That's the height of this, the row itself, yeah? So I could make it something like 25, right? Yeah, you could, but remember I just made it so that it my cell size, auto cell size, right? Here's the other one. It said all cells, auto size rows mode. And this is auto size columns mode. I can make that the same for all cells, right? So that it does the columns mode as well. Let's see what that works out to be now. That's pretty good, right? Fits everything in there, right? So all the details in there, that's pretty good. My header I'm not happy with. That header should be bigger too, right? Let's format that header. How do I do that? Where's that? Column header visible true. Column header height size auto size, right? That's what it's all auto size. But what about the style for my column header? That column header should be bigger. I want to make it so that the, what was it? Column header border style. That's right. No, it's just the kind of border it has, right? That's not really going to do it. Column header default cell style. If I click on this, right, it shows me that it's 8.25, right? So I could choose 20 because I think that's probably right. And let's make it bold. And let's choose Lucida Sans again because that's a match up with our style. So Lucida, yes, Sans.
I want to do this with everybody else, but I don't have the column header. The ones that you put all cells, column header, like auto size rows.
You guys don't have that?
No, we don't have
Okay, that might be a new thing for me. But otherwise you can just put in the actual values, right? So put in the values that I have. But notice that what I did do is go data grid view under column header default cell style. I changed the size of my cells to make them match, and so that makes sense, right? And if I press play now, I can see that it looks a little nicer, right? Still kind of clunky. If I want to add in some padding in the cells, I can do that as well, right? And if I go down to where it says, well, is it border style or is it, I want to make sure that it has the right margin. Okay, margin is 333, right? That's what that is. But I want padding. I want actually some kind of padding in the cell. So the cell border style single, and then column header border style. That's the border. That's why it says border. Column header's height. Mine's 39. If you want to match what mine is, right? Column header's height size mode. I put auto size, right? Here's my columns collection. I go back to this. Hey, here's something else. What if I click on one of these things for my content menu strip and all that stuff? I can actually do a lot of the stuff we just did per field, right? I can also choose per field. My data property is last name. That's actually associated with my my database, right? And if I scroll down here, column type is a data grid view text box column, right? I'm just using one of them. Let's say look at first name for a second. And then I have a divider width, right? My minimum width is 5. My width is right now is 186. Yours might be a little different. But I could certainly use that as well. If I click on the little arrow, I can also do things like edit columns, right? I don't want to do any of this yet. It says enable column reordering. I could add that in, right? And I could also click preview data. Previewing data is really cool because it actually tells you what the data is going to look like if you click preview. It actually gives you a bit of a preview to show you the data so that you know that you're getting a connection to the database. That's what this does. Let's keep going. I'm spending some time here because you're going to have to modify this stuff later on your own, right? So here's the grid color. This is control dark, right? You could also make that whatever color you want. So for example, let's say this is the grid, and if I want to make this something like white, I can do that. What would this look like now? It would look like this, right? The grid. How about this background part in here, right? My background part. And can I still move these around? Notice that right now, the way I have it now, I can't move these around anymore, right? I can't modify the actual columns. I can't do that. And if I try to add some data in here, like, thinking that it'll work, like for example, my first name is, James Kirk, right? And then I add some data in here, whatever, for the number, press tab. It'll take you to the next line, but it won't actually do anything. If I go back, no, because if it would show up here, right? We have to do some other stuff to add it in, right?
But if you edit your table in SQL, then it's going to appear.
It would appear automatically. If I edit my table in my SQL, the question is, for people who are watching, would it appear? And the answer is yes, it would appear in here, right? So data grid view actually shows, all we're doing is understanding what we can do with it. Let's keep going. All right, so right to left, show icon, size is the actual size of my, if I go to data source, we're good. Default cell style, if I go to my cell style again, you can see the selection for color and all this kind of stuff. My window, my back color is my window style. If I want to make sure that the back color is white, I could certainly do that. I can make it so it's white. I could, instead of making it what it is, it's going to look like this, white, right? It's important that you check, oh, here's padding. Take a look at padding here. Oh, padding is 0, 0, 0. Let's add a padding of all 5 to everything, like 5 points of padding to everything. And press OK. Now you're going to see it grow a little bit more. And if I press OK, you can see now that I have a little bit of padding. It looks a little nicer. And I have a little bit of space here that I can kind of come back in. I could come back in here a little bit, just so that, and a little bit, I could come up a little bit more if I want to show list data. But I don't want this little line here. Or how do I take this away, this background color here? How do I align this so that there is no gray, it's white, so you can't tell. So it's not as bad. Well, background color is here, app workspace. So I could always go back here and change the background color to white. And now it's not a little bit nicer, right? So even if I'm not exactly perfect, I mean, I can kind of go right to the cell if I really wanted to. And let's see how that looks. Its alignment and what this thing looks like is important because otherwise it'll look like really crappy, right? Okay, that's good. Now we can probably bring this whole form in a little bit more, right? So that the form is aligned properly. And what I want to do is just pull this stuff down just a touch over here because I want to put some kind of other control elements on the top. All right, so we'll save this form and let's press play. So if I want to have my student data appear, I could do it like this. This just basically allows me to view my student data. This is the read of the CRUD, right? Instead of doing full CRUD, I can do, create, read, update, delete. Okay, creating means I would make a new object, but what about updating? Could I change Tony, to, I don't know, instead of Tony Stark, can I go Martha Stark? Is that possible? Would that persist?
It's just a display.
Huh?
It's just displaying that.
Right, I can't really do anything. If you notice, it doesn't allow me to do anything here. And I can't refresh the data in the list, right? All it's doing is displaying. Well, if that's true, and if I can't edit it here, why am I making this editable? Should this be something that's locked, right? How do I lock it up so I can't really do anything? It's just a display of a list. I could. I can't change the table size. I can't do that right now, which is good. Yes? I could. Right. First of all, lock doesn't mean what you think it means. If I go back, and if I go to lock means I can't move it around anymore. Right. That's so when I do my formatting, if I go to locked, true, and if I try and move this thing around, I can't do it. Same thing with student list. If I like where it is, just to help me design everything, I turn locked on to true. That's just locked. If I want to lock stuff. By the way, I'm going to ask you to do some of this stuff in an exam. Right. That's why I'm bringing it up now, so you can know how to put things together. Right. All right. Padding. If I go back down here, I mean, I can't. Oh, here's cursor. My default, correct, I can change the cursor when I hover over stuff. I can change the cursor if I really want to. I can do that. I'm not going to. I'm going to keep going down some other stuff that you can see. Location, locked, margins, maximum size. I could say the maximum size of my grid, but I can't really change it right now because the way I've put it together, right? Row template. How about this? My form. Do I want my form to be allowed to change size, right? And certainly you can change it by modifying how big you want it. Like for example, on my control box for my form, here's my control box. I could turn it off, right? Which means you won't see the X or whatever. I could do that. The border style is really important too, right? Border style for my form. So if you go to form border style, right now it's sizable. I could definitely turn it to fixed single. And if I go back to do that, if I press play again, once the border style for the form border style is fixed single, then I won't be able to resize my form anymore, which is what I want. Here it is. So now can't resize my form. Could minify it. If I maximize it, that's bad, right? So I want to turn my maximize off. How do I do that? So I go back where it says maximize box. Let's turn that off to false, right? There we go. And if I make this play again, you can see that I can't maximize anymore. I could restore. If I kind of minimize this thing, and if I kind of put this back up, it'll minimize and restore it back to size. I can close it, but I can't maximize. So this is kind of a workable form that gives me a student list. Data grid view 101. How to read data, right? Any questions so far? Yes. Yes. How would we enter data in the grid view? Remember that part of it is what I'm trying to do on the front end is I'm trying to connect to the data, right? That's what I'm trying to do. Let's read the data from my database. And we're actually using a SQL database to do that. That's live, right? So if I was going to go back to my SQL Server Object Explorer, and just to show you this, now, so far we've only had 5 names, but if I go to open the students up right now, these students, and I want to right-click on and say View Data, it'll give me the data, right? Here's the data. Notice that there wasn't any extra ones made. Let's make another one. We'll make that James Kirk one or whatever you want to make it. James Kirk, and then I'll add some other dummy data in here for the number. I press Tab, right? It's very similar to a data grid view, no? It looks almost identical, right? Well, that's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like something that you've seen before. Okay, cool. So I've got this in there, and if I run this again, I should see that extra piece of data in there. Here it is, James Kirk, right? It did do it, and if it'll keep expanding until I start seeing my scroll bars. Hey, what happens when I get my scroll bars in there? And you can test this by adding some dummy data in here. Like, for example, I don't know, Mary Smith. Well, this is what it's going to look like. And now my question is going to be, do I want my table to look like this, where I can't see everything? I can't see the whole student number or whatever. And if I'm comfortable with this, I'm okay. You might say it's okay to do that. Or you may say, no, I don't like that, Tom. I want this to be a little wider and give myself an extra little column space for this so that I don't see the scroll bar that kind of hovers over my data, right? That's just a style thing. Okay, here's another thing. if I hover over one of these tables, like one of these cells right now, let's finish the Mary Smith thing, right? So whatever, right? And I press tab. Okay, if I hover over or hover back, like right now, nothing, hovering does not working. There's no effect for this hovering stuff, right? I can click on one of these things, these tables. I can highlight the whole thing by clicking the button, right? So I can highlight each table. I can't right-click. There's no right-click availability on this thing, right? That doesn't allow me to do that. But there's some built-in functionality. Microsoft gives you some built-in functionality. For example, I can sort by default by clicking on the table itself. That's built in. There's nothing for me to code here. That's pretty cool. So if I want to sort by last name, if I want to sort by first name, I can do that, right? And I can do it the other way around, right? So I can toggle the sort functionality. I can also sort by student number, right? Just by clicking on the top of the table here. Again, I'm just talking about the data table itself. Lots of stuff to do. All right, here's something. Allow drop would be for drag and drop. Allow user to add rows. True. Allow user to delete rows. True. Allow user to order columns. False. Okay, cool. So I can't reorder the columns around. That's cool. Allow user to resize rows. True. So do I want that to happen? Resize my rows? I probably don't want that. I don't want them to do that. So I'll probably turn that off just because that's not what I want, right? Add, delete, resize columns. I don't want that either. I want my columns to be fixed just in case. I will probably turn those on just to make sure that I have more control. My anchor is top left, right? I could choose my anchor being somewhere else. Right, I'm going to keep going. Causes validation, cell border style, right? Columns, context menu strip I don't have, my different cursor, data member, right? I don't have a data member, but it's connected to my data table anyway. Okay. Edit mode. What if I went to a different kind of edit mode? If I said edit on enter instead of edit on keystroke, you might see, or on F2, right? Let's go edit on enter, right? Let's see what that does and if that changed anything. So blah, blah, blah. Okay, go in here and I start typing in something else. Mary Smith, la 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 la, and then press enter, right? Does it do anything? Well, I can edit. Remember, I can edit stuff. I made a change, right? I selected a row. Listen to my words here. Selected a row, and then I have to somehow, with my row selected, I want that selected data to go to the database. I got to program that, right? Again, if I go back and if I press on this, she's gone, right? She's gone. And if I enter the data again, like Mary Smith again, I did it the same way I did it before, still going to enter the data. The same effects. Nothing is different here, right? So this, the option that I put in there really didn't do much in this particular context, right? Tab index is where this thing goes when we tab in. Virtual mode is false. Let's see what else that would be very useful for you guys to understand. Grid color we talked about. Modifier is private, so this thing is private if I want to do it. Read only is false. If I've made this read only is true, right? That means I can't add anything to the data at all. If I go read only true, now if I try and type in there, can't. That's just read only true, right? That's something maybe we want to do so that we don't want anyone to enter new data in, right? Maybe what I want is some kind of control to add data into the table, right? And maybe a button that says something up here that says add new, like an add new button or some other kind of form, instead of adding it in here, which can be kind of clunky actually, right? This kind of entry. This is more of a, I want to display, right? Okay, well, let's add that button in and see what happens, right? So if we want to add new, and then we'll stop. Well, let me unlock this thing. All right, and we'll put this student list here. We'll put a button here, and then when we click this button, it's going to take us to a add new data form, whatever, add new student. That's where the button's going to be. Let's put the button in place. So here's my toolbox. I'm going to kind of pin this up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the button. There it is. And pull that in. And again, if I want to change the button style, I want to change it so it meets my styles. Notice I did not do that for the entire form this time around. Again, it's really about the way you want to do this. There's many ways to do the same thing. Go to sans. We're not going to make it demi-bold for this one, but we're just going to make it so that the button is the right size. And I expand this button just so that it fits. Right, maybe the same size of my button. It should say add student. So add student. And if it doesn't fit, we can resize. It won't fit. There it is. Add student. And if I double click on add, first of all, let's make the name of the student. So I will have this add student button. Add student button. There we go. And if I double click on this, I'll get the event handler for adding the student. And what this will do is I can go from here to another form to add the student. Question. Before, what I was doing was I was passing data from one form to the other. Remember last class, what we did was made all the forms ahead of time. And what this is doing is I'm going to go and kind of pop up a form, some kind of dialog box that allows me to enter the data for this particular form, right? Connect to the database. Do I really have to pass data to this form, right? And the answer is no, I don't, right? The only thing I need to do is add data to the database. So from here, I can generate that new form. Now, I need the form to generate, and we're going to make that form really quickly, and then we're going to break. So how do I do this? So we're setting it up, right? So I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer. I'm going to right-click on my project. I'm going to add, right? New Windows form. And you can go add a new item if you want to, but if it's in your quick hit list, you can do that too. Windows form. We're just going to call this, you know, the add student form, right? So add student. That's what this is. Add form. Here's my add student form. I've got my, if you notice on the Solution Explorer, I have two forms now. I have my student list form, and I've got my add student form, right? Here's my add student form. My add student form also needs to connect to the database, right? But what I want to do is I want to gather the information. That's what I want to do, right? And I need almost like an object that I want to kind of connect with the database to send all the information to the database. That's what I want to be doing eventually, right? But for now, let's just lay out what the form will look like. It's going to take us this week and next week to kind of do full CRUD, right? Because it takes a little bit of effort for us to do this. Okay, so let's lay out what the form is going to look like. I'm just going to pull it open a little bit more. The add student form is definitely not what the name of the form is going to be. Let's go to properties. And then underneath here, if I pull this up a little bit, on the bottom, we're going to see, well, first of all, the top, it says this add student form is correct, but the name of the form, or it should say add student. So add on the title of the form should say add student. There it is. Now I need some fields, right? So I need some stuff to put in there. So some labels, and I also need some a button, maybe a submit button, some kind of add new student submit, you know, or so we need that too. So I need a submit button, which I'm going to put in the bottom right somehow. I'm just going to kind of lay things out really, you know, sloppily right now. I need a label, you know, to tell me, well, this is the first name, last name, you know, kind of stuff. Some kind of label for the student, add, you know, student, new student information, something like that. My label for the new student, some kind of text box where I'm going to add in my first name. Another, maybe again, we're going to do the same thing. Notice I'm kind of doing everything at once, copying and pasting. There's a reason for this. There it is, copy paste. I'll do all the form in a second. I'll lay things out. This is where the second area here is where my first name, last name, and then my student number. That's got to be in there. So copy paste. There we go. Put this underneath there. So this I can start aligning how my form is going to look. Like looks like my button's going to be somewhere down here, right now. What about if I have a cancel button? What does the cancel button do? It'll close the form down, right? That's what it'll do, and it'll take me back. Here's the other thing. Would this form pop up on top of my list, right? Or is this form going to be hiding my list? And when I press cancel, it'll show my list again. You got to think of what this is going to do. But for now, we need a cancel button too. So let's copy paste. So again, we're just designing our form here for a second, high level. All right. One thing I know is I'm going to make all these controls 20 point, right? Because that's what I've been doing so far. So kind of do all this. I'm going to highlight each of these controls. I'm going to change all the fonts for these controls. If I go to properties, and I can right click and do properties too. And I can change them all at once. If I go to font, these are all like properties. I can go change all this stuff to 20. And again, if I want Lucida Sans, because that's the one I'm using, there it is, 20. So I want this bold, not necessarily, not for this one. I may have to make individual ones bold, but not these ones. So press play. So now I've got more realistic sizes. Definitely for my buttons, they have to be aligned, right? So this is like, you can see that these don't quite say everything that I need them to say. Let's make sure that these buttons say the right things, right? And I can realign the sizes and stuff as well. So let's just choose both buttons and then go right click properties, right? And I can go in here and change the, if I want to, I can change the text for the buttons. Let's just say submit is the largest one. There it is for the buttons. And if I kind of scroll out, you can see that I'm scrolling both buttons at the same size. This is important so we can have both buttons at the same size. And the reason why is because I'm going to change one of these buttons to say cancel, but I want the same size of the buttons, right? So again, I'm going to go to properties for this one, and then the text instead of submit is going to be cancel. I could change the colors of my buttons. My submit might be like some kind of green color. My cancel might be some kind of my normal color. So let's make this submit button green. So I can kind of right click properties just to make it interesting. And so it's not black, like just dull gray like this. So I could do that. So the back color is what I want to change on the buttons really quickly. You guys should be this quick when it comes to doing stuff. Eventually, you should come to the point where you're quick enough where you're comfortable kind of creating, I'm going to use Dodger Blue. That's pretty cool. And then for my fore color, which is my foreground color, right, I'm going to choose, instead of control text, I'm going to choose something that's more in contrast, use a white. So my submit button, my cancel button I'll leave as is. I'll put them next to each other. So that's what my cancel submit button will look like. If I highlight both and I move them over, I can actually highlight them according to the size of my form. Now my form is just a random size. Again, you can make it so it's more acceptable. This one is going to say add new student, right? Add new student or whatever, or add student, new student. So right click on the label. And this thing will say new student. And I'm going to change the label name just in case I want to change it. I won't probably, but I'm going to say new student label. By the way, I might as well do the buttons. This is my submit button. Let's bring the properties and pin them up for a second. Right? So this is my submit button. I want to have access to it on the actual C# side, right? And this is on the code side. And this is my cancel button. Cool. This will be my first name label. First name label. And I'll change the text so it says first name. Please do this with me so we save some time. So you don't have to just watch. It's good practice for you to do it anyway. This will be last name. And on top of here, I'll have a last name label. Yeah, let's try that again. Last name label. Same thing with this one. I'm just doing all the labels right now. This will be the student number label, student number label. And this will just say student number. Right, so that's what it looks like. We're going to align everything in a second. My new student should definitely be bold. This one here where it says new student, let's make that demi-bold. So it looks a little bit different than these ones. And for these ones, obviously I want them to stretch, just to change this up. What I want to do first of all is align everything to my new student. So I'll say I'll click my new student first, then click everything else. Remember we tried this before, and notice on the alignment side, we can click this align button up top in the menu, up here. Which everything now is aligned on the left side, right? And now that everything's aligned left, I could again highlight everything that I want, and I can push it to the left-hand side and to the top. So I have my left and my top aligned, right? And now I'm going to pull this one day. These three, I'm going to pull them all together until they align to the right, right? So they're going to be like quite big. Okay, that's not what I wanted, but we'll take that off in a second. This is my machine. So I'm kind of highlighting all these three fields. Let me try this again. Oops. Come on. So highlighting these three fields, and then what I want to do is I want to pull one, which will pull them all, right? And I can make them so that they make sense. I'm going to pull them as big as this. It's kind of big, but it's okay. I mean, we can make this form a little bit different shaped, and I'm not going to stop you from making it whatever works for you at this point. All right, so we've got our text boxes. Let's align these things too. So let's make sure that the text boxes are labeled properly. So my text box 1 would be the first name text box. First name text box. Okay, last name text box. Last name text box. And the student number would be, oops, student number text box. Student number text box. Again, I do this because it's easy for us to remember those things if we use the same conventions over and over again, not because you have to use those long names. And again, if you're not happy with the form size, let's say, for example, you say, well, Tom, I think this is a little bit too big. You can always pull them in. Right? So say, well, I want it to be like something smaller than this. And then we can always pull these in. So it's kind of aligned to that side. And then I can always pull this in, right? So that way you can make your form a little slimmer if you wish. Something like that. There we go. And then you can align to the form by pulling this into the form. There we go. That's kind of as good as we're going to get it. Okay, cool. So we got our first name, last name, and student number. This is kind of the form to enter the data. We haven't got anything on the back end yet, but we will. We do have, one of these things has an event. If I go to properties, if I click on events, as an example, and if I look at one at a time, right, then if I want to see one of these, which one has the event, it's this one. The first one, by accident put it in there, I want to take it off. This is the text changed event. I definitely don't want that for now. And we're not going to do validation yet. We're just going to say that, we're going to assume that the user is going to enter all these in, and they're all mandatory. They can't be 0, right? When we click the submit button, we're going to get the proper data that's in the database, right? So the submit button is really important. Submit button is going to actually do something, so I need to click on that. It's going to be an event for this one. And I'm definitely going to have a cancel button, which is going to take us back to the previous form. So double click on that. All right, so I got those things. All right. So I've got my form, save everything. And then we're going to take a break in a second. But how do I open up my form from my add button? So if I go back to my student list form on the design side, here's my student list form. Oh, by the way, you know what? I don't like this. I really don't like the color of my button. This button here. Let's change that too. So my add student. Let's go and change my back color to green. I made the other one blue. I don't know why. But let's say I want to make my back color green. So maybe a kind of a lime green. I don't know. And then change my front color, my fore color, to white. Just so that way there's a little more a little bit more color, right, for the form. All right, so when I double click on the student, it's going to definitely open up my other form. How do I do such a thing? Well, I want to instantiate my form from this form, right? So I'm going to do something like this. This new form is called add student form, right? So add student form. There it is. We can just call it add student form, right? lowercase, right, is equal to a new add student form. That instantiates the form, but it doesn't really show it, right? I need a form, I need to create the form object so that way I can show the form object, right? All right, cool. So now when I come in and I say something like, I want to show this one, my new form, and I want to hide my old one. I don't want to get rid of it because I want to go back to it eventually, right? So my add student form, I'm going to say add student form, oh, lowercase a, add student form, this one, dot show, right? And I want this dot hide, which hides this current form. All right, so one shows, the other one hides. I don't want to close this one because if I close my original form, because I'm instantiating my new form from my old one, if I do that, it'll close down my application. I don't want that to happen, right? So this is okay. One thing I didn't do is for my add student form on the design side, I didn't tell it where it's supposed to go. You know what? Just to be consistent, I want to change the actual form itself so it starts center screen. So it says Windows default location is going to go to center screen, just like my student form, my student list form, which lists my data, is also center screen, as you can see, right? All right, let's save all and run and see what happens. Okay, cool, I got this, and I click add student, and it hides the other one, brings this one up. That's what it should be. That's what you should see right now, right? Now this doesn't do anything else. If I click cancel or submit, it doesn't do anything yet. But let's go back, and in my add student form, right, when I click my cancel button, this is easy to fix, this functionality, right? I want to close this one, right? Closing the form. Why? Because if I don't close my form down, right, then if I hide it, I mean, it's still going to be open. I don't want that. I want to close my form. But if I go this dot close, though, I can't do anything else, right? So I want to show the other one first, and this is the problem. How do I show my previous form when this one closes? An example of this would be, well, I want to show my student form, my student list form, right? So if I go student list form, I don't have an instance of my student list form. So is there a way of accessing the parent? So if I go this dot parent, right? And it says sets the parent container of the control. That's not it. Parent form. Is there a parent form? It may or may not be, right? Dot show. I want to show the parent form and close my form. No. You know, we don't know how this is going to work. Because remember, what I've showed you before was I make individual forms. One's not dependent on the other one. Close one, up, open one, doesn't matter, right? And there's inherent issues with that one too. What happens here, right? Because it's something different. We haven't covered this one. So if I press play, as an example, add student form, and then I cancel. Oh man, I get an error, right? Because I have no idea what my parent form is. I don't know. I have no clue. I've got to pass that in. How do I do that? There's a trick to it, right? In my student form, my add student form, I create something called, you know, previous form or student list or whatever you want to call it, student list form, right? But we do that as a property, right? So some kind of as a public property of this thing. If I go to the actual class and I make a property, and the type is going to be form, right? But it's going to be student list form. And I'm going to say student list, right? Just to say it. I'm going to call it student list form, sure. List form. There we go. Student list form. Well, what I can do is I can set the property of my student list form from my other form. So if I go, this is the trick I could do. So if I'm in my student list form itself, and before I go to the next one, as I instantiate this form, right, I could say something like add student form dot, and if I can find it, right, which is the student list form, is equal to this. So I pass in a reference to this form into the new form, right? All I'm doing is making, maybe I'm just making a connection. I'm saying, hey, if I have a student list form, it really actually refers to this form, the form that I'm creating the other one with, right? Okay, if that's true, then if I go run this again, if I go back to my add student form, I've got this. Down in here where I cancel, I don't want a parent form show. What I want is this dot student list form dot show. That's what I want. All right, and then I want to close this one down. Let's see if that works. So add student list. Okay. Oh man, I don't want to do this right now. Cancel, and then this one pops up again. I can do add student list again. Oh man, I don't want to do this. Cancel. I don't know. Now we have to be careful of what's happening on the stack. Do I have additional forms that are opening up? Like I'm making an additional form, a new form every single time, right? So I'm not instantiating a new form, right? It's not an anonymous form that I'm making. I'm making a named form that's attached to my student list. So how many of these forms do I continue to make? And is it going to crash my code eventually, right? Like, can I ever go back to the student list form again, right? Or is it gone? Like, what happens? Well, because here's the trick. And if I close this one down for a second, let me show you something. Every time I click that add button, this add student button, I'm reinitializing this form. It actually only exists when I click this button, right? And once I've done with it and I've come back to this point, it leaves this point, comes back to here when I press close, because closes down that form. It closes it and it's gone, right? When I close back and I come back to this point, right? And if I click the button again, actually I do the same thing. I add another instance of the form that I call add student form. And what I'm doing is I'm replacing the existing one with this one. So I'm actually not going up in terms of total number of forms that are open. This is another way to go from one form to the other. All right, let's pause for a break. And when we come back, let's see if we can actually add some data and do something. Probably not, right? Because it's more difficult than you think.